Welcome to the studio.
It's good to be here.
So you heard this story first as a child. How come it stuck with you?
Well, it had a big effect on me when I was at that age, around 9 or 10 years old. And it caught me off guard. It was an experience that I hadn't had before. And some of my relatives and my mom, we went to a longhouse, and this elder came in, and he was a very powerful-looking figure too. And I didn't even know what he was there for. They don't tell kids nothing at that time.
You were just tagging along.
Just tagging along. And he comes in, and everybody sits down, and he sits in this chair, this birch chair made of birch branches. It's covered in furs and things. He sits down, he has this pole, and he bangs it on the floor. And he speaks in native tongue first. And it's like, whoa, it just has a feeling to it. And then he tells this story, a story that is very, very meaningful, almost sacred amongst the Haudenosaunee, the people of the Six Nations. And when he told this story, it just gave me chills. It ran right through me, and it was the story itself, but the way that he told it and the sound of his voice and everything. And at that time, when you're growing up and you think, oh, geez, I'd like to be an astronaut, or I'd like to be, a rock and roll musician or something. And then after this, I distinctly remember saying to my mother, when I grow up, I hope I could tell stories like that. I really, really like that. And so the story did stay with me because it was pivotal. And then a while back, the guy who runs Abrams Books in New York, Michael Jacobs is his name. And he's an admirer of music and everything. And one day he asked me, is there a story that we'd like to do a book for young readers with you. And I had done this book called Legends, Icons, and Rebels with my son and with Jared, who works with me. And we had a great time doing that. And it's not a kiddies book. It's a different thing, the way they refer to it, as a book for young readers. And so he thought that I was into doing that kind of thing. And he said, is there a story that you could tell that you would like to share? And I told him a little bit about the Hiawatha and the Peacemaker story. And he said, whoa, that's incredible. He said, I've never heard that before. And I said, well, the Hiawatha thing, people are confused because of Longfellow's poem. That's where most of us know the name from. Mm-hmm. And Longfellow just got Hiawatha and another Indian mixed up, and did whatever he wanted to do. But this is the story of Hiawatha and the Peacemaker.
Could you explain the story for people who haven't heard it?
Well, very basically, it is that I chose to tell the story through Hiawatha. And Hiawatha had lost his wife and children in the warring nations. This is pre-white man. And all the Indian nations, it was always, like it was in the Roman Empire around the world, it was people about power and control and all of those things, and war, and after Hiawatha lost his family, he was just kind of wandering aimlessly, and this guy came along that they referred to as the Peacemaker because he talked about a new way and teaching the great law of peace. And at first everybody was like, what? What are you talking about? We don't even know what that means. They only knew that the way that they'd always lived. And it was about struggle and about war. And he said, no. We're going to learn, and we're going to change all that. And we're going to start taking care of one another and living in unity. And they're like, what? You know, how's that going to play? You know, and over a period of time, they convinced the 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee, which they called the Iroquois nation, and it's a complicated story. It just doesn't happen that easily. But over a period of time, they inspired these people to come together for a better place, and they dug this tree out of the ground symbolically, and they put all of their weapons of war in the base of this tree and replanted the tree on top of the weapons and called it the Great Tree of Peace. And that would be symbolic to the people that had that power to it. And so anyway, they did that. Then sometime later, the Tuscarora joined, and that became the 6 Nations. And for that, what it's been now, 500-600 years, the people have lived in unity and in caring for one another all of that time.
An amazing story. You described it as sacred. I want to ask you more about those experiences growing up, that pivotal storytelling experience for you. You also you've talked about how music also struck you on those trips to visit your mother's side of the family at 6 Nations.
Yeah, was how music came into my life in a very, in a very powerful way. Up to this point, I think, when I was 7, 8 years old, there was something, I was drawn to music. My parents told me that I seemed to be kind of drawn to music. But at 6 Nations, it seemed to me that everybody played an instrument or sang or danced or did something because the entertainment was provided by
each other.
Right? It wasn't like they were flying in people to perform from England or anything. So I thought, well, I got to do something to get in on the club, and I'm looking at, one person plays, some Iroquois drums, water drums. Another person dances and plays shakers, and somebody else plays a mandolin, and there's a version of a fiddle and guitars, all these instruments, stringed instruments. And I thought, well, the guitar thing that looks like the cool one to me. Maybe I'll try that. So my cousins and uncles started teaching me, little accord here and accord there. My hands were too small to really do too much yet. But over a period of time, when I was about 12 years old, it became apparent that I was getting kind of good at this. And then by the time I was 13, I was like, I'm better at this than anybody else here. So maybe there's something here. And also, I come off the reservation, a 6 Nation Indian Reserve, and now I've got a guitar in my hand, and rock and roll is born, and I'm reaching puberty. So
couldn't have been timed more perfectly.
It was a shoo-in.
I also love that cultural approach to music, that it's something that everybody does, that you find in some cultures, but not in other cultures.
Right.
That idea that it's not just for a separate class of people. It's something everyone can participate in. I want to ask you about this experience. Your mother is of Mohawk and Cayuga heritage. Your father was Jewish, and you made several trips yearly to the reservation. Also, you lived in Toronto. What was that like for you growing up with that confluence of cultural influences?
Well, when I think about it now, it was almost like walking into another dimension, going from the city into Indian country. And I felt privileged that I could go between these two worlds, and nobody said, "Excuse me, you're going to have to wait in the car." You know what I mean? I was embraced in both places, and I thought
it was a joy for you.
It was a joy for me, yeah. And when we would go to the reserve, I thought, wow, they've got it made here. They just know how to do stuff nobody in the city knows how to do. And
Like what, for example?
I've said this before, that
Yeah.
my cousins and everything, they didn't climb trees. They ran up a tree, and they could make a weapon. They could snap a branch off a tree and make a weapon in 5 minutes. And it was so beautiful, and it would fly through the air. And I thought, whoa, nobody in the city knows how to do this kind of stuff. They could tell that it was going to rain in about 8 hours, and would make plans accordingly and listen to the ground. And they would pick certain things out of the fields, certain things that were really good for you to taste and all kinds of stuff. And I thought, they got it going on. And the water was pumped out of a well. And the water tastes so fantastic. There was nothing like that in the city. So, being quite young and everything, I thought, and isn't it great? There's 12 kids living in the house here. This is amazing, because I was an only child. So that was impressive to me. Yeah. And I never crossed my mind that it might be crowded. I just didn't think
when
of
you're
it
a kid,
like
you
that.
just love it. You love the energy.
Yes, absolutely.
If you're just tuning in, I'm Shad, and this is Q, and my guest is writer and musician Robbie Robertson. His new book is for young readers. It's called Hiawatha and the Peacemaker, and it's inspired by his First Nations roots. Robbie, starting in the 90s, you made albums that reflected your heritage, music for Native Americans, Contact from the Underworld of Red Boy, and now you've written this storybook. Do you feel like you've gotten closer to your roots as you've grown older?
It kind of lives inside you. It's just a matter of how much you can share something is what that becomes. You don't get closer when it's already in there. You know what I mean? So I feel it, but what I could do, what I felt I could do some years ago was that I thought I could turn some people onto some magic that they don't know that much about. And I knew a lot of people from the Native community in North America from over the years, great artists, great talented music people. And so I brought some of them together because they had asked me to do the music for a documentary series called The Native Americans. And at that time, I thought, yes, this is an opportunity I've been waiting for, that I can open this door and I can do it in a special way, that it isn't, it's not like a whim, like, okay, I think I'm going to do the Indian thing now. You know what I mean? I wanted to do it in full respect and with some special connection that I could share that. So I did that, and then PBS, after I did that, came to me and said, if you're going to do another record of, following your Native heritage, we would love to do a documentary on you doing that music. So the first one, I did music for the show. The second one was the show following me doing the music. And so there was just a great experience, and it felt really authentic sharing it in that kind of way.
And it was mainly the fact that these opportunities presented themselves. That was really the catalyst for you to start to explore explicitly this part of your heritage?
Well, yes. What they did was they opened the door a little bit, and I pushed it wide open and ran right in. Now, I just took advantage of the situation, to be honest.
First Nations issues have been moving more to the foreground in Canada, everything from land rights to the unsolved murders of Aboriginal women. Do you feel a sense of connection to the politics of the moment in this country?
Your heart can't help but go out to a lot of things that are going on, and you think, this is just not fair, this is not right, this is not getting the love and attention that it needs. And it's been going on ever since the beginning here in North America and around the world, too, with Native people. So we've become, unfortunately, a little bit accustomed to it. And every chance that we get, when something rises up and we get to say, whoa, wait a minute, we got to look closer at this, and we got to do right by this. And so there's hills and valleys in it, and sometimes it gets the attention it deserves, and sometimes it doesn't. Just like situations with a lot of minorities.
Yeah. How do you see your role in that? I mean, I was struck in this book, there's a nod to the healing power of music. Do you see your role in the politics mainly through music, through art, or are you tempted to speak out? How do you see your role in all of this?
I've done many things, activist things over the years in regard to the Native people of North America, and I've tried to help out my friend Leonard Peltier, who's been in prison for many years. And there is, and on and on and on and on. There's so many things. And, but I do feel a very strong connection to whatever I can bring to it. Whatever I can do, I'd like to do. I feel it's the least I can do. And for me, doing it through books or music is the most, the most ideal thing for me, because that I'm there. I'm not very good at going around to rallies and telling people what to do, but if I can spread the word and I can share things and maybe help some people and be even an inspiration to some young people at Six Nations, it is an honor for me.
It's hard to figure that out, where the best place to make your contribution is.
Sometimes it is, but if you do what you know, then you're on the right track. There's a thing that's happened here that I'm really honored and excited about. But the people from Indigo and Chapters and Coals, I've asked them, could we get this book of Hiawatha and the Peacemaker to First Nations libraries and schools all across the country as a gift? And they are buying 4,000 books of it and sending it. And this wonderful friend of mine, Chief Roberta Jameson from Six Nations, she knows where everything should go. And so between Heather at Chapters, Indigo, and Coles, that I'm actually going to go there tonight and do a signing of the books, just because I have such great appreciation of them stepping up like this.
It's so interesting also in this sacred story, the implications for the politics in America, the U.S. Constitution, in some ways based on what's come out of this story. Fascinating. Can you tell that story?
Well, the Founding Fathers in the United States, all the rules that they knew of came from Europe. Everything came from Europe at that time. And trying to find their own ways, their own voice, their own methods of dealing with, it was a new world. It was different. And they came to the conclusion that they didn't want to have kings and queens. That's the way it was everywhere. Mm-hmm. So they met with the Iroquois chiefs and just meeting with people, trying to figure out, like we all do, we try to gather all the good ideas we can. And they met with these chiefs and they said, well, from the great law of peace, we've come up with a system. All of our people have a voice. Everybody votes. And we choose our laws and our leaders that way. And they were like, huh, really? That's got a ring to it. Democracy, how about that? Now, democracy had been tried a few hundred years earlier in Greece, but it didn't fly. They tried it for a while and it failed terribly, and people wanting power didn't want to put up with that. So the Founding Fathers incorporated that into the Constitution of the United States. And hence, in North America, we ended up with a pure democratic system.
I think that's a fitting point to end on, Robbie. Thanks so much for talking to me today.
This is great. Great. Thank you.